What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the David Greene Show, Real Talk Real Estate. Today's episode is going to be a little short. I just wanted to take a minute to address some of the controversy around my departure from the BiggerPockets podcast, clarify the position that I've had with BiggerPockets, the mix-up in our branding, what the situation's like, how you can expect this podcast to be different, maybe spill a little bit of the tea that many people have been wondering. By the way, when I spill tea, it's always green tea. I wonder if I should do another podcast, the Green Tea Podcast, all about real estate gossip. I'm sure people wouldn't hate that. All right, so let's start with how I started hosting the BiggerPockets podcast. Probably 7 years ago or so, Brandon Turner and Josh Dorkin were hosting the BiggerPockets podcast. Now, Josh Dorkin owned BiggerPockets. Brandon Turner worked at BiggerPockets. And I can't say for sure, but Brandon might have had a little bit of ownership in the company, like a tiny bit, but he really wasn't the owner. Brandon was responsible for a lot of BiggerPockets growth. He's a remarkably intelligent man, a very hard worker, a super good guy, very likable, very charismatic, and people flocked to him. Well, when they flocked to him, they also flocked to BiggerPockets. And the combination of Josh's dogged work ethic and intelligent mind with Brandon's charisma and beautiful eyes made BiggerPockets the behemoth of real estate investing. This was the place that you would go if you wanted to learn how to invest in real estate for free. They were against all of the influencers and gurus that were teaching you how to do it, and they would show you how to do it for free. They had an incredible forum where people could ask questions about real estate investing. They developed a blog where people would write articles about it. It was awesome. Now, here's the irony. Josh Dorkin started it because he had some properties that went poorly, and he wanted to start a site where people could get questions answered because when he was investing in real estate, he had nowhere to go. So a failed real estate investor created the biggest real estate investing platform in the world and became a massively successful entrepreneur. Kudos to you, Josh. We all owe you one. Now, Brandon and Josh started this podcast. It was one of the first podcasts that was ever started. Haven't heard Josh's side of the story, but from what Brandon tells me, he brought this idea to Josh and said, we should start a podcast. Josh said, what is a podcast? And that was how the BiggerPockets podcast got started. Several years down the road, Josh had some issues with his family's health. One of his kids developed a rare condition, and he had to step away from running BiggerPockets to help take care of her. Great guy, great father. At that point, they had to find another host for the podcast, and BiggerPockets cycled a couple different employees in. Unfortunately, none of those people had very much experience investing in real estate themselves, so the podcast was in trouble. Now, I had been interviewed on the podcast, I believe it was episode 169 by Brandon and Josh, and I had listened to every single episode that they ever did before that. I was a huge BP fan. This was before BP is what it is today, so it wasn't a common name in the world of real estate investing. In fact, I don't even think you could have called it BP. You would have had to call it BiggerPockets. I became friends with Brandon after our recording, and we got pretty tight. Now, I messaged him and said, hey, what's going on? How come Josh isn't on the podcast? It's not doing that good. And he explained to me that Josh was stepping away. Well, Brandon and I got together. We came up with a plan for me to host the podcast with him. The problem was I didn't work at BiggerPockets. Now, at that point, the idea was BiggerPockets didn't want anybody hosting their podcast that didn't work in BiggerPockets. So they had a problem. And to be honest with you, they weren't super thrilled about the idea of going outside the company. It took a lot of time to build trust so that they knew that when I came to the company, I would represent their brand. I wouldn't steal their people. I wouldn't steal their listeners, and I wouldn't compete with them. A lot of people say, why can't I find a mentor? Why can't I have someone take me under their wing and show me the ropes? If only I could find somebody. They don't realize that many of us have done just that, given people what they wanted, showed them how to do it, and then they screwed us over, left, took our contacts, took our resources, and said, sayonara and thank you for all the help. Be happy for me that I'm establishing financial freedom. But they devastated our business in the process. And there's not a lot of people losing sleep over that. So if you've ever wondered why you're having a hard time finding a mentor, or you're having a hard time finding support system in the real estate ecosystem, or why you always have to pay money to join a group, this is a big reason why. There's a lot of backstabbing that goes on. There's a lot of money involved in successful real estate investing. And anytime you get a lot of money involved, you get a lot of shady characters that are going to be involved. This is why so many drug deals go bad. With criminal enterprises, you often see a bad ending. When there's a lot of money involved, people will make decisions they normally wouldn't. So I understood the position BiggerPockets was in, bringing me into their world. They were very protective of what they had built. And things started very slowly, and I had to earn my way into that world so that they knew you can trust me to represent your brand and wave your flag. Over time, that's exactly what happened. Brandon and I got to be better and better friends. We developed better and better chemistry. The podcast got bigger and bigger. Eventually, it was one of the top business podcasts on all of iTunes. That's what we called Apple Podcasts before it was called Apple Podcasts. The show got monumentally large. We had the biggest people in the space on. We probably had 250 to 300,000 listens for every episode. It was literally like talking to an entire football stadium full of people every single week. Crazy. But with all of that influence and power does come risk. Does come some risk for BiggerPockets. They had to worry about what would happen if Brandon got run over by a bus. What would happen if David left the show? He could go start his own company. And they didn't know me that well. I came in through Brandon. I didn't have a relationship with some of the owners or the high-level executives at BiggerPockets. I didn't live in Denver. I wasn't on site. They rarely ever saw me. And they did watch me building businesses like the David Greene team, like the One Brokerage, and the other things that I was doing that wasn't really affiliated with BiggerPockets. So as you can imagine, fairly, there was some tension there. There was a lot of concern it could happen. Now, out of respect for them, I treated them the way that I would want to be treated. I didn't steal their audience. I didn't go build a brand outside of them. I didn't go launch my own podcast. All the books that I published were through BiggerPockets. If I wrote a blog article, it was for BiggerPockets. When I went and spoke somewhere, I represented BiggerPockets. Treated them the same way that I would want to be treated, the same way that I would want any agent on my team to say they are with the David Greene team. I don't want them using their affiliation with me to go work something out on the side and cut me out of it. That's out of integrity. That's not the way that you would want to be treated. And as a person of faith, it's very important to me that I do treat people the way that I would want to be treated. That's one of the things that our Savior Jesus commanded us to do. Now, the podcast continued to be monumentally successful. And then another change happened. Brandon decided it was time for him to step away from the podcast. He wanted to go start his own thing. The Better Life Podcast, the Better Life Tribe, the Better Life Everything. Brandon shocked the real estate world when he left BiggerPockets. And in the process, he left me. It was a crazy day, but I still remember the people at BP coming to me and saying, David, we need you. What are we going to do? It was at that time that I came up with the idea that we needed to do more shows. Rather than people saying, where is Brandon Turner? I wanted people saying, what is this? This is a different type of podcast than I'm used to. Traditionally, Brandon and I had interviewed a guest every single week and said, hey, tell us your story and tell us how you did this. Now, you got to realize at the time, no one else was doing this. When you heard the story of a gym teacher that bought a bunch of duplexes or an entrepreneur that became a millionaire through real estate, it was crazy. It was so inspiring. It tickled your brain. There wasn't any way to hear this information unless you had coffee with the old guy in town that was a real estate investor. Now it was available everywhere. And on that commute to work to do that job you hated, or during that workout that you couldn't stand, you had Brandon and I keeping you company. We had developed chemistry. We had developed rapport. We had developed a unified front. Brandon and I would spend hours and hours and hours talking about what our thoughts were when it came to real estate investing. Should we tell people to do X or Y? We wanted a unified front, and it's because we understood the influence that we wielded. If we went and told people to borrow to the hilt and use other people's money and recklessly buy real estate, and they did it, their blood would be on our hands when it went bad. We took the position very seriously, and I'm proud of the work that Brandon and I did. When he left, everything changed. Now, what happened is I proposed new formats to BP about how we could do podcasts. One of them was something like Dave Ramsey. That became Seeing Green. I wanted to do more coaching calls where we brought people on live and had them explain their problem and we tried to answer it. I figured that would differentiate us from the other podcasts that were also doing interviews similar to us. We did several of those coaching calls. I really liked Patrick Bet-David style, where he would bring in different people that he knew that were business minds and they would discuss the news of the day. I proposed that show and that ended up becoming On the Market. And then lastly, I wanted to do topical shows. These were shows where just me and another guest would dive deep on one specific part of real estate investing and educate people on what a rehab was like, or how to run numbers, or what loan products were available, or why you choose this market over that market, when to house hack, and when to get a short-term rental. Rather than an interview where a guest told their story, I wanted the host to be able to tell a story. And if I'm being honest, that's just because I knew that as a host, we had more experience talking, sharing information, and communicating. And I thought that if you were hearing it from the host, the show would be more entertaining than if you were hearing from a guest that's often nervous and isn't used to speaking. The podcast continued to be great. Not only did it continue to be great, BiggerPockets branched off and started more and more podcasts. Different hosts came in, different topics came in. Real Estate Rookie, Real Estate Money, the Invest Her podcast, On the Market, Our Show, the Business Podcast. A whole umbrella of podcasts started to develop. Now, it wasn't long after this, if memory serves correctly, that BiggerPockets was bought by someone else. See, Josh couldn't run the company anymore because of the issues that he had with his family, and he needed to be there for them. So the company was sold, which is a normal thing in business, to a private equity company. And standard operating procedure, when private equity buys a company, they make some changes. It's very easy to be critical of this, but I think that's foolish. It's normal in business for these cycles to take place. Most people build a business to sell it to somebody else or to exit in some way. Some of the changes were great. Some of the changes I didn't think were that great. But overall, I was happy with how the podcast was going. It continued that way for some time. I had Rob Abasolo and Henry Washington come in to help co-host the podcast with me. They did a great job. We continue to build rapport, we continue to interview guests, and we continue to take our position seriously of educating people on how to invest in real estate responsibly and wisely. Now, during COVID, a lot of people thought the real estate market was going to crash, and I took a different position. When everyone else was saying prepare for a bloodbath, I saw how much money the government was printing, and I told everybody you should actually be buying. I came under crazy heat. I got a lot of criticism. I was called reckless. People said David's only saying this because he's an agent and he wants everyone to keep buying houses, not thinking about the fact that I was still buying houses, and also not thinking about the fact that as an agent, I could easily tell everybody to stop buying or sell, and I'll just get the listings instead. I saw the money that was being printed. I warned the masses, and I'm very proud of taking that controversial and scary position because that's exactly what happened. Prices went up and up fast during COVID. Several years later, exactly what I warned people would happen did happen. Inflation. Everything became more and more expensive. Rents are going up. The prices of properties are going up. But unfortunately, so is your energy, gas, food, medical bills, materials, labor, all of it. To combat this, the government raised interest rates, but they raised them suddenly and they raised them quickly. They also continue to raise them over and over. This had a devastating impact on the world of real estate. They didn't give us time to prepare for it, and they didn't do it slowly. This impact was particularly lethal in the world of commercial real estate. See, if you don't understand how commercial real estate is valued, it's not just on comparable sales like residential. It's valued on how much income a property produces. And if you raise the interest rate that you buy that property at, you significantly decrease the profitability of the property. That means you'll sell it for way less than what you bought it for, but you couldn't have known what rates were going to do when you bought it. Now, this problem was compounded by the fact that commercial properties are not bought with 30-year fixed rate notes. They're usually bought on what are called balloon payments. Every 3 years, 5 years, or 7 years, these properties have to be refinanced or sold. So all the notes on these commercial properties that were coming due were happening at the same time that rates had come up a ton. People were forced to sell at a time when their properties were worth less than what they paid for them. If you were involved in syndication or apartment complexes, you lost a lot of money. Yet residential real estate didn't have this impact, and it's because of the financing. When you finance residential real estate, you get a 30-year fixed rate term. Now, some of the voices you're going to hear at the end of today's episode were people that I talked with that were making a lot of money at the time that wanted to invest in real estate that I warned don't get into the commercial space because of exactly these reasons. But in the residential space, we saw something very differently. Values continue to hold tight or keep going up. This created a market that was very difficult for investors to navigate. It was very hard to buy real estate because with rates higher, they didn't cash flow. But if you didn't buy real estate, the inflation made your money worth less. Taking action was difficult. Not taking action was painful. You would expect prices to come down, but they didn't. And that's because the supply and demand variables were way out of whack. There still were not enough properties for as many people as wanted to buy them. When you add the tax benefits that come from buying real estate, accelerated depreciation, increased knowledge of cost segregation studies, and real estate professional status, and you paired that with people that had to sell properties and do 1031 exchanges, there were still plenty of buyers for the properties that were out there, even in the higher rate environment. This made the world of real estate investing incredibly difficult to navigate. Not surprisingly, it also made it much less appealing. Not as many people wanted to jump in and buy real estate when they weren't doubling in value in 3 or 4 years. Now, all of this hit at the same time that BiggerPockets had launched several podcasts with several different hosts and increased the number of podcasts they were putting out from 1 a week that Brandon and I were doing to several times a week. You can't blame BiggerPockets for taking advantage of the market and striking when the iron is hot. There was a crazy demand for content and they provided it. And they got bigger and bigger and bigger as they did it. And I can say all the podcast hosts that I've seen, I'm proud of all of them. And I think that they're stand-up people. BiggerPockets also increased the number of books that they were publishing. I myself have published 6 books through BiggerPockets Publishing, but it felt like they were coming out with one every month. All of this content, all of this information, all of these options. It was very different. Where Brandon and I had once been a unified front, very carefully selecting how we were going to represent BiggerPockets of what we were going to say. It had quickly changed to several different people with several different opinions and several different agendas. It just wasn't the same, and that's okay. Structurally, things had become different. Now, fast forward to today, and BiggerPockets has decided that they want to go in a different direction for the hosts of their main show. Rob Abasolo and I were told that we would no longer be the host, but we were welcome back as guests occasionally. And we both said we're happy to do it. However, since I wasn't going to be hosting their podcast anymore, I wasn't going to sit around and twiddle my thumbs. Fast forward to now, Real Talk Real Estate, the David Greene Show. The goal of this podcast is going to be to bring the ideas that I once brought to BiggerPockets, but to my own show where I'm not going to be replaced with other people. I'm going to bring in different real estate investors and different business minds to answer questions the same way that I do. I want you to get perspectives of other smart people. I'm going to share what's going on in my portfolio, both short-term rentals, traditional rentals, and medium-term rentals. I want to expose how my rent by the room properties are going. I also want to share with you what's going on in my businesses, what my real estate agents are seeing, how to work with real estate agents, as well as the financing component that I see with the one brokerage. I might be the only person in the country that has the background in real estate that I do. I'm an investor. I invest in residential. I invest in commercial. I invest in short-term rentals and medium-term rentals and traditional rentals. I got the whole oatmeal spread that Goldilocks was looking at locked down. Then I'm an entrepreneur. I have a real estate brokerage. I have a loan brokerage, and I have a real estate team. I'm still in the trenches every day helping people build wealth through real estate, both representing them through services and educating them here, not to mention the books that I'm writing and have already written. I'm also a speaker. I also run a mastermind called Spartan, which is a real estate university. I've got my hands in a lot of things, and that gives me a very unique perspective, which is why I want to have a podcast to share it with you all. Now, I think the podcast is going to become amazing. Hopefully it already is, but I'm also expecting that it's going to take me time to work out the bugs because that's how everything works. So I appreciate your patience and sticking with me as I do that. And I really appreciate your patronage in continuing to subscribe to the show and leave me good reviews as I'm bringing you this content for free. I'd also like to say I won't be able to make some of the shows, the ones where I take your questions and I answer them for everyone to hear, without your content. I need you to give me your questions in video format and in written format to make those shows. You can support me by going to davidgreene24.com/ask, ASK, and uploading your questions there. We'll also take some of your comments from my Instagram, from my YouTube channel, and other places and share funny, witty, or clever things with the audience. The goal here is not just to educate you, it's to make it fun. When Brandon and I had hit our stride, you could see the relationship we had. It was like being a fly on the wall and seeing two fun guys that had bought a lot of real estate, which is why you were listening, talking about life and owning it. I'm trying to recreate that here now. I want the show to make you laugh. I want the show to make you think. I want the show to pierce through the crap that other people sell you. If you don't already know, most real estate influencers that make podcasts or have social media are portraying it differently than it really is because they make their money through selling you courses and programs and materials. They need it to look exciting and sexy as fun to get you to spend your money to get in. Because that's not how I make my money, I don't have to do that. I make my money by getting you to come and buy your house or sell your house with us at the David Greene team. Let me manage your short-term rental with Performance Property Management, or do your loan through the one brokerage. What that means is I have to build your trust. I have to build credibility, and I need you to know that I would like you to come to me when it's time to buy or sell a house. That means that I can give you the real talk. I don't have the pressure to give you a shiny version of what real estate investing really is. I'm going to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'm going to do my best to do it, making it fun, entertaining, and helpful. Now, if you prefer to consume your content on YouTube, I'm there. Just go to youtube.com/@DavidGreene24. I'm also on Spotify, Apple, the Google Store, and you can follow me at your favorite social media at David Greene24, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, all of it. I really want to hear your feedback about what you liked about the shows, what you didn't like about the shows, and what you'd like to hear more of, because that's how I'll decide what shows to make. For instance, I'm going to be releasing in a couple episodes an episode on negotiating real estate with examples of how I negotiated with the real estate agents that were representing the sellers when I was the buyer. I got that because somebody told me, David, I'd really like to hear more about how you negotiate. So if you bring me your ideas and you bring me your questions at davidgreen24.com/ask, I'll know what content you're looking for. Together, we're going to build an amazing community of trustworthy, no BS, and straightforward information. Now, lastly, my sincere hope is that you build wealth through real estate. But to be honest with you, I don't want to see you do it so that you can fuel a bruised ego, live a materialistic lifestyle, or think you're better than other people because you've had more financial success. Well, I want everyone to hit financial freedom so that they don't have to worry about money, like Forrest Gump said, one less thing. I also don't want to create new monsters by taking insecure people and fueling their egos so that they brag and gloat about what they have, making other people feel bad about the fact that they don't. Not everybody in life is in the same position where they can pursue wealth like some of us can. I never got married, I don't have kids, and I could put a lot more time towards building my businesses and my portfolio than some other people did. That does not make me better than them. That does not make me anything other than lucky. Did I play my cards well? I think so. Sometimes I didn't, and I'll share on the podcast exactly where I made those mistakes, so hopefully you can avoid them. But I'm a huge fan of keeping your successes as quiet as you can and sharing your failures more. So as you listen to the show and you grow your own portfolio and you have success, please remember that not everyone's going to be as lucky as you are. And it's not a win to make somebody else feel bad about where they are in life because you're happy about where you are. At the same time, being a victim doesn't help anybody either. We're trying to win. The show is about winning. And my advice to you is going to be designed to help you win. All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And I appreciate you listening to this episode. I've got a little montage for you to check out why you should listen to the podcast. So if you've got a minute, please share this with anybody else that you think would benefit from a real talk real estate podcast.
Raging Al Iaquinta, former UFC lightweight, now broker and owner of Iaquinta Real Estate. You should listen to David Greene because whether you're an experienced investor, agent, broker, or whether you're a rookie just getting started in your real estate career, David is a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure he's going to have some incredible guests on. Always fun to listen to and always educational. No matter who you are, you're going to learn something.
Chris Weidman, UFC former middleweight champion, and you guys should be listening to David Greene because he is the real estate guru in this country that I go to. He's one of the smartest guys I know. Any questions with real estate, he's got the answer. He's done it all. I can't wait to listen to his podcast. I hope you guys listen as well.
I'm Corey Kent, country music singer and a good friend of David Greene. And man, you got to listen to his new podcast. This guy knows real estate better than anybody I've ever met. If you want to learn a ton, a wealth of information like I have from this dude, be sure to check out his new podcast.
My name is Nick Lamagna, host of the 8-Game Podcast, Real Estate Investing for Entrepreneurs. I am also a former amateur MMA fighter and current jiu-jitsu black belt, and as a high-level real estate investor for over 15 years. And thank goodness I have Mr. David Greene. I've been a loyal listener to him for years and years and years, and he's been one of my most trusted sources to give me accurate information for what's happening today. And I cannot be more excited that he finally has his own show, and I will be tuning in every single episode for more information to help me get through this wild and crazy real estate market that we're in today.
What's up, guys? Aljamain the Funk Master Sterling here, former UFC champion. And when I'm not out practicing how to be a mean backpack or working on some new business ventures like Funk Harbor Rum, I'm listening to David Greene's podcast. And the reason is because it's very insightful. He's a very knowledgeable guy. And if you're interested in real estate like I am, this is the podcast for you.
This is Brennan Turner from the Better Life Podcast. And you should listen to David Greene because David Greene is not only my best friend in the entire universe, but David Greene understands real estate at a deeper level than anybody I know. And he doesn't sugarcoat the truth with like platitudes and happiness and optimism all the time. When things suck, he tells you it sucks. When things are awesome, he tells you it's awesome. David is the man.